Hi guys, it's Tony Robbins. You're listening to Habits and Hustle. Crush it.
Hello and welcome to Habits and Hustle. And today we have Dr. Will Cole joining us. He is a leading functional medicine expert. He consults people around the world via webcam, and he specializes in clinically investigating the underlying factors of chronic disease, such as thyroid issues, brain issues, digestive disorders, hormonal dysfunctions. He was named one of the top 50 functional medicine and integrative doctors in the nation, and he's a health expert and course instructor for the world's largest brands, including MindBody Green and Goop. His newest book is called Intuitive Fasting, and it's already a #1 bestseller. He talks about how fasting can recharge your metabolism and renew your health. Please listen to this episode. I am sure you will find it very interesting, and you will find some practical information that will help you with your health. Enjoy. I mean, I'm curious, how did you get involved with Goop? Because I know that Gwenyth wrote your foreword, and I know you're always on their site, and I know that that's kind of like given you so much traction, and it's great for you. How did that whole connection happen? Because usually, you don't live so close, you know what I mean? You're kind of far away, so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I started one of the first functional medicine telehealth centers in the world over a decade ago. So I think that's a part of it, is that the world's always been small for me as far as functional medicine is concerned. So I have only seen patients via webcam. And I think that just connected me to different doctors and different people in the space. So I met Gwenyth through Alejandro Younger, who is a cardiologist who also has known her for years. So so that's how it came to be.
So can you tell, I guess we're just going to start. I guess I'll do a proper intro later. I have a ton of questions. So
yeah, go for it.
So like a functional medicine doctor, could you call yourself a functional medicine practitioner? You don't call yourself a doctor. Is that not like a naturopath? It's like, I'm Canadian. We call them naturopaths where I'm from. I'm living in LA now, but
Yeah. First of all, Canadians are like some of the nicest people in the world. So
thank you.
I love Canada so much.
Thank you. People say that all the time. So I like that.
True. What province are you from?
I'm actually I grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba. Have you ever even heard of that before?
Oh, yes, I have. Of course. Yeah.
You have. Okay.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Toronto, and I went to school in Toronto, and I worked in Toronto for many years. And then I moved here like eons ago. But yeah. So
Awesome.
by the way, it's also the same for Pittsburgh. I mean, when I saw and I read and I heard that you weren't from here, I'm like, oh, okay. Like it kind of, yes, everything kind of all comes together so nicely in a pretty little bow,
Thank you. Yeah. So I am a doctor. I'm a functional Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioner. I'm a doctor of natural medicine, and I have a doctorate in chiropractic as well. So the reason why I use the word functional medicine practitioner, because that is what the Institute for Functional Medicine calls us. So the Cleveland Clinic's Functional Medicine Center, they're all trained all from the Institute for Functional Medicine, or IFM, and that's who's trained myself and my team. So that's just the proper terminology for it. I am a doctor that practices functional medicine. But to answer your question, naturopaths, not all naturopaths are trained in functional medicine, but there are many naturopaths that are trained in functional medicine. There's such an overlap because there's a lot of commonalities, right?
Yeah.
But functional medicine is a very specific school within integrative thought, integrative healthcare, because there are MDs that are functional medicine practitioners, there's DCs, there's acupuncturists, there's oriental medicines, there's DOs, and there's naturopaths too. And there's nurse practitioners too, if I didn't say that. So there's a whole field of conventionally or, they're trained in healthcare to some degree. And then they go to postdoctorate education to be trained through the Institute for Functional Medicine. So that's what IFMCP is. That's what I am.
Oh, okay. So then what does a functional medicine person do versus a regular MD?
Well, yeah. And just to reiterate something I said too, is that most of my colleagues are MDs as well. But they, so most Institute for Functional Medicine certified practitioners, IFMCPs, are MDs. The majority of them are. So the difference is that there's a few things. One, we interpret labs using a thinner reference range. So anybody that's out there that's listening will know, hey, when I get my labs done, I go to my doctor, I get my labs done, and I'm this number, my biomarker, all the labs in my lab are compared to this reference range. Well, we get that reference range from a statistical bell curve average of the people who go to that lab. So people that predominantly go to labs, sadly, are people with health problems. So there's a lot of people, especially women, that know intuitively something's off here. I don't feel right. And they go to their doctor, and the doctor says, oh, they run the labs and everything's quote unquote normal. And they're told you're just depressed. Here's an antidepressant, or you're just getting older. You're a new mom. That's all that it is. And then when
hormones,
it's like these blanket things, which are well intentioned, right? I mean, they're trying to give reasons as to how this person could be having these symptoms despite these quote unquote normal labs. But what they're unintentionally telling them is they're a lot like the other people with health problems that they're being compared to. So we're looking at a functional range. That's a thinner range within that larger reference range. So that's where vibrant wellness resides. So we're standardizing optimal health range, and that's what we all use within functional medicine. And then we run more comprehensive labs. So the training in the standard model of care, which certainly has its place, there's nothing wrong with it, but they're trained to diagnose a disease and match it with a medication. So that serves many people, and there's some people that need to be on medication, but there's a lot of things that fall through the cracks of that system because health and health problems exist on a spectrum.
Right.
So, and we realize ultimately no one's sick from a medication deficiency. So let's find out actually what's driving these problems. So we're running more comprehensive labs to get multiple labs perspective. It doesn't change the conventional treatment model. So that's superfluous from their standpoint. They're still going to give you the antidepressant or the statin drug or the diabetic medication or thyroid, whatever the case may be. We want to ask, okay, what's upstream for this? Why is this problem here in the first place? Right. So it's based off of a health history, but it's just more thorough labs. And then we realize we're all created differently. So there's not a cookie cutter, one size fits all approach to getting healthy. So it's tailored to the individual. So that's what functional medicine is compared to conventional.
So then when you do like all your telemedicine webcam like you have your business is, like you said, the first to ever do this around the world. How do you get a good idea, an understanding of someone? You're testing them differently. Is it the questions you're asking them and then you send them the tests, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, and I think us doing this 10 years ago and for the past decade, people didn't get it as much because they were like, I thought you'd have to be there for that. And we're not replacing someone's primary care physician. We're not replacing someone's GP. So physical exams obviously still need to be done locally. We are not replacing that. But I think because of the pandemic right now, people understand it, that doctors had to learn overnight that, whoa, we actually didn't have to be in person for all this stuff. And we take a very, very comprehensive health history. We ask a lot of questions, and we spend, depending on the doctor you're talking about, but an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, the initial visit, really digging into a case thoroughly. Before you see them, you have to prepare for this to get prepped, so you're not wasting their time just kind of catching up on their case. So I do prep, and then I spend an hour and a half with them on top of that. So it's very thorough. It's like a clinical Sherlock Holmes, because these are people, my people are people with autoimmune issues, metabolic issues, these really complex mystery things that they've gone to many brilliant conventional doctors and many brilliant alternative doctors. So I can't be, showing up to the party late. I need to be on point and hold space for them and do my due diligence and give them the thoughtfulness and the fresh perspective that they deserve. So I don't have to be with them physically. We drop ship labs to them. We coordinate all the labs. Like if it's a blood lab, we find a local facility that they go to. We arrest our kits. So we either FedEx or UPS, they ship them to the labs. So you can be anywhere. We have patients all around the world.
Well, what I thought was amazing, I went on your website and I did two things. I did your inflammation quiz to see how much inflammation I had, or if I have any, which I want to talk to you about. And then secondly, I did the metabolically flexible quiz. What I couldn't believe, I swear, I was like answering these questions and it's like next page and like another laundry list of questions. And it was like next page. I'm like, there was like literally like 100 questions. even on this, like, I thought it was going to be like this, like, dinky little, quiz that you have to always do. They ask you, like, are you this? Are you that? And it's like this small nothing quiz. But it was like, even that was extensive. I was impressed by that.
Thank you. Those quizzes, all of them are adapted from questions that I ask patients. So they're not like just for people to just like know if what personality type they are. They're deeper things are like which golden girl you are.
I'm Dorothy, by the way, but or Sophia. But it's funny that you said that show because it was like my favorite show growing up.
Me too. It's so funny.
It's the best show ever. And it was also like, you asked a question I never heard before in terms, was it the inflammation thing about if your eyebrow, can you say that? Because I never saw that before.
Yeah. So the outer third of your eyebrow, if that's thinning, that's a clinical hallmark sign that there could be a thyroid problem. Doesn't mean it automatically is. There's other causes for it too. But it's these myriad of different pieces of the puzzle that we put things into context. So from that health history, we could see, okay, what labs are the most relevant? Because one of the critiques that we get in functional medicine is that we run too many labs. And that's why health history is so important, so we don't have to do that. Look, any lab beyond the basic lab is too much labs for some people with a conventional mind. So that judgment by itself doesn't hold water to me, because we want to be comprehensive, but we want to be comprehensive without being excessive. So questions like that will show us, okay, we need to run a thorough thyroid panel to see if that's an issue or not, to rule it out. It may not be. A lot of these things do mimic other things, but we have to.
How did that ever come to be something with the thyroid?
Yeah, the thyroid, every cell of our body has a thyroid receptor site. So it is, it governs so much of our life. But normally that's one of the first things or the most common things that can happen, because it's not just the outer third of your eyebrows, but it can happen all over your head as well. But that's just a very telltale sign of that specific thing. But people can lose even more than that. That's just one aspect of it.
Can you give me a couple other things that that people have never really heard of or been asked when they've gone to see somebody like that? Because to me, that's like so like in the weeds that like I was blown away when I saw that as a question.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Let me think of some other ones. One is when you get up quickly, do you get dizzy? Oftentimes people will say to me, oh, that does happen to me all the time. I didn't even think about it. The eyebrow, I get that a lot too, is that they'll be like, oh my gosh, I had looked in the mirror and I realized like that is me. Or my kids always comment about it, but I never really thought about it. So orthostatic hypertension, basically getting up, getting a little bit dizzy. That could be a sign of a hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis problem, or HPA axis. It's basically some sort of hormonal imbalance. We have to run labs to substantiate the specifics of it, but some problem with cortisol, some possible problem as well with some electrolyte issues, and other hormones could be interplaying with that. Another one would be craving salty foods. And then you have to bring context to that too, because they may say like, oh, it's just potato chips, and it's not this.
And I love them, right?
And there's no shame in that. But you have to ask questions. You have to do follow-ups of like, okay, well, what are we talking about? Some people are like, I could literally like lick a salt block. Like I just need this to like get through the day. So that could be a sign of an HPA axis issue too, with cortisol, a stress hormone. So yeah, those are some, but there's a lot. I mean, honestly, we ask hundreds of questions.
There's hundreds of them. So like, let's get to like, okay, so one of the books that I know you've written a few, but one of them is the inflammation spectrum book, which I thought was very, very good. And I think you talk about us all the time about how like at the core of every root of every problem is inflammation. And then that's why I took that quiz and everything else. How do you even go about, besides if I didn't look at that quiz, like how do you even go about knowing where you are on the spectrum like this and what the spectrum is? And then another, I guess, part B to the question would be how that also affects such things as like mental health. Like people don't ever correlate anything together. They just think, there's no real, like there's a disconnect between all of these things.
Yeah. Sure. Inflammation is quite a nebulous term for some people that they know it's not right, but they don't really know the specifics of what we're referring to. But inherently, actually, inflammation is not a problem. It's a product of our immune system. So in balance, in check, inflammation fights off viruses, fights off bacteria, heals wounds. There's nothing inherently wrong with measured, appropriate response, inflammatory cascades. The problem is when inflammation is thrown out of balance. So it's subject to this Goldilocks principle in the body. You don't want it too high, you don't want it too low, you want it just right at the right time. And that applies to our hormones. You don't want excess hormones, you don't want deficiencies. It applies to our gut microbiome. You don't want bacterial or yeast overgrowth. You want right colonies, but you don't want a deficiency of them either. So it's really about this homeostasis that we're looking at with inflammation. So inflammation too high for too long, chronic inflammation is this commonality. And I think that's the kind of the specifics that I like to bring about on this topic is this commonality. It's not the causation of everything, because then we have to ask the question, what's even causing the inflammation? So commonality, yes, it can cause symptoms for sure, but ultimately it's not the most upstream core of this because something's driving the chronic inflammation. So that's my job in functional medicine, to run labs to not only understand inflammation, which is certainly the byproduct of some disturbance in the body, but we want to look at what's causing it as well. So inflammation is a product of the immune system. When it's this forest fire that's burning in perpetuity, that's the issue. So that is linked to autoimmune conditions, to anxiety, to the metabolic issues, type 2 diabetes, depression, hormone problems, heart disease, cancer. You could go on ad infinitum and look at all chronic health problems that we talk about, have these either they're overtly chronic inflammatory or they at least have inflammatory components to them. And to your second point, you're absolutely right. And as I have been talking about inflammation spectrum the past year or so, we like to separate mental health from physical health, but that is not accurate. Mental health is physical health. Our brain is part of our body, so to somehow separate it as a separate thing, that anxiety and depression and fatigue and brain fog and ADD, ADHD, autism, all these things are just separate than our physical health. No, there's tons of research exploring this. It's known in some studies, it's known as the cytokine model of cognitive function. Cytokines are pro-inflammatory cells. So it's researchers looking at how inflammation is impacting our brain. How is inflammation impacting mental health? So that is definitely something that I explore, because I see a lot of people with anxiety and depression and fatigue and brain fog. And there, of course, are mental, emotional, situational components to that for many cases. But that's the bidirectional relationship between our thoughts and emotions and our physiology. Our thoughts and emotions, if someone's feeding themselves with shame or stress or living out trauma or unhealthy relationship, that stuff raises inflammation levels. But conversely, underlying gut issues, hormonal problems, metabolic issues, those things impact your thoughts and emotions. They double your risk for anxiety and depression. So we have to look at both sides of that coin.
What's hard, though, is to understand where one begins and one ends, right? Because you can have a combination of both, right?
Yeah, and they typically are. You have to deal with both sides. You have to. And some people will tell you, my life is great. I have no problem. And they truly, for all intents and purposes, that's true for them. There may be some past trauma going on and they don't even know it. But for the most part, there are some people that will tell you, my life is great. I have no stress. I have I just live
no stress.
Life. Yeah, right. There's few people, but that's very frustrating for those people, because they're I literally don't even know what's going on in my body, but I have runaway anxiety. I have runaway depression. I don't even know what's going on. Why am I getting panic attacks? I'm not even stressed about anything. It's that physiological component of things like anxiety and depression that we have to explore.
And is it as simple as, I know, and we're going to get into your new book about intuitive fasting, but is it really about just, can diet alone really help, and how you diet really change the level of inflammation in someone's body alone? Have you ever seen someone go from being on all these meds, real meds, to then tweaking their diet and actually being antidepressant free or anxiety free? Or is it just like more of a degree, maybe from 100% you're down to like 80%?
It depends on the case. My job is to say, we're not anti-medication at all. I mean, there's some people that
I know.
to be on medication. We just ask the question, what is your most effective option that causes you the least amount of side effects? And when you talk about things like anxiety and depression, just use that as an example, it depends on the case. Like, my job is to move the needle in the most powerful way, as much as that person's body will allow. For some people, it's 100%. And I would say many people, it's 100% resolved through functional medicine. But there's some people, you're absolutely right. It'll be like 50% resolved or 60% resolved or 70% resolved. No, those people, some of them still have to remain on those medications, but we're dramatically improving their health, because oftentimes the people that we're seeing, they're on all the medications.
Yeah.
They are doing all the things their doctor's telling them to do, but they're still struggling and they've exhausted all the options within the conventional setting. So at that point, what do they do?
What do they do? Tell me what you do. What do you put them on? What do you do with them?
Well, we have to really explore the case. And that's the thing with, if we can keep using that example, anxiety, depression, or thyroid issues, whatever we're talking about here, those are like check engine lights for me. Like, I know the check engine light's on, but why? So to kind of go back to my earlier statement of what's driving the inflammation, I could have 100 people with anxiety and I'd have close to 100 different answers, at least a combination of different things, where there are be bigger pieces and smaller pieces, but it's normally a confluence of factors. It's a perfect storm of variables that need to be explored externally: trauma, stress, not getting enough sleep, toxic work environment, unhealthy marriage, whatever, that kind of stuff. But then there's so much physiological stuff oftentimes too. So I'll give you one random example that we see quite often. It's not so random in our world, but random from a conventional thinking. Your gut is formed from the same fetal tissue. Babies growing in their mom's womb, the gut and brain are formed from that same fetal tissue, and they're inextricably linked for the rest of our lives through what's known in the research as the gut-brain axis, the connection between the gut and the brain. 95% of serotonin, your happy neurotransmitter, is made in the gut, stored in the gut. So we have to look at dysbiosis. People, there's many studies that show different bacterial imbalances, bacterial overgrowth, gut inflammation can drive anxiety and depression. And actually has been shown in certain studies, the neurological changes that people can see, the causative factor is the underlying gut issue, the second brain that's going on there. Antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications are not going to change that. So they may get their head above water, which has its place. I'm not against people being on those medications, but people know intuitively, wow, this takes the edge off, but not fully, or it doesn't help me out at all, or it helped for a little bit and there was a honeymoon period, but then it quit working. So at that point, we have to keep digging, like, what is going on here? So I've seen countless of cases where they've got their gut healthy. They really dealt with that underlying upstream driver of neuroinflammation or brain inflammation, and it completely resolved their symptoms. That's not every case, but the point is, we see the check engine lights on. What's going on? That's going to be different from person to person.
How about inflammation and cancer? There's a correlation there too, right?
Yeah, it's the immune system out of control. So it's this unfettered inflammatory response that can trigger and be a part of the pathophysiology of some cancers. So absolutely, you want to have a healthy, measured, modulated immune response. And based on someone's genetics or something they're exposed to, that can manifest different for different people. But look, researchers estimate that our genetics haven't changed in 10,000 years. Why are we seeing an epidemic rise of chronic health problems like never before? Better diagnostics plays a part of that, like it explains part of that. But no one in the health space, both conventional and otherwise, will tell you that's entirely due to better diagnostics. We know more people are getting sick with these issues, whether it's heart disease or cancer or autoimmune conditions or mental health issues or metabolic issues. This is not just due to better diagnostics. This is a serious problem. And there's a genetic and epigenetic mismatch that researchers are exploring. I'm not exploring, I'm just reading the research and applying it in people's lives. But researchers in the scientific journals are looking at this evolutionary mismatch between our DNA, which has remained unchanged for 10,000 years, but these genetic predispositions for things like cancer and heart disease and autoimmune conditions and diabetes are being triggered like never before because of this genetic epigenetic mismatch, the way that we live our life now.
I mean, and also, and this is a great segue into your new book, Intuitive Fasting, because I feel like fasting has become, or intermittent fasting has become a very mainstream fad-like thing to do, right? Like when people they're like, oh, I'm intermittent. And I mean, people are like, oh yeah, I'm doing intermittent fasting, or I'm doing this. And is it, for all, and I know you're going to yell at me, but I always felt like it was just a way to control your calories, right? Like, if you have a window to eat, then you won't overeat for weight loss. I'm talking, we could talk about the health, I want to talk about the health benefits and all the other stuff, but it became such a fad, right? So what does it mean when you call your book intuitive fasting? Because because intuitive eating is also a fad, isn't it? A little bit.
Yeah.
I've heard that a lot too.
Yeah, no, I would call them fads, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because everything in healthcare, like I've been a health junkie in my own life personally since I was like a little kid. I was an odd kid that like spent my money like going to the health food store to like buy random things as like a 14-year-old. So this is like since the 80s and 90s for me, which has been part of my life. So you see over the course of the decades that there's a lot of zeitgeists, there's a lot of bubbles that happen. But look, I'm not concerned so much with the bubble. I think it's good because more people are aware of good things and it betters people's lives. It educates people, hopefully. There's a lot of noise oftentimes with the way that headlines go and confusion goes with Dr. Google. But other than that,
yes.
Like I think that education, that's how people are educated sometimes. It's like they're hearing things they've never heard before. But even when fads come and go, if it's solid science and solid clinical application, that's what I get to see on an hourly basis consulting people online.
Yeah.
So yeah, like fasting's a fad, but doesn't mean it's not legitimate. Humans have been doing it for thousands and thousands of years.
And people have had amazing effects. But, I remember because like you, I'm similar to that point, like where I've always been really obsessed and like curious and fascinated about this. And do you remember not that long, it used to be that you should be eating 5-6 little meals a day to keep your metabolism revving, right? That was one of the things. To eat breakfast first thing, to get your metabolism going. Like all of these, ways of living to be healthy and to be more fit and whatever else have now been kind of like abolished basically. And the new research, and I read this in your book, was that eating two meals a day versus eating 5 meals a day has been way more effective in weight loss and health and all these other things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a lot of things that we were told growing up, it's not necessarily the truth. But the
Where
truth
did it come from? Where do those things come from then?
Well, look, it's relatively true, but not absolutely true. So that advice example, like 5 to 6 small meals a day, that's relatively true when your body's metabolically inflexible. So if your body is metabolically inflexible, you're in a sugar burning mode and you're living on kindling, which is sugar for fuel, that advice is actually understandable because you're like, yeah, that person needs kindling to get through the day. If you take off that 5th kindling, they're going to be hangry and irritable and bite your head off.
Awful. And I have an example. I mean, I honestly, like when I was reading it, like seriously, I'm like, this is me. Like if I don't eat a meal, I you don't want to be around me. Like I get shaky and mad and angry and it's a nightmare. And so can we talk about this whole metabolic inflex? Like how does one become this? What is it? Define it for people.
Yeah. And to your point too, I think it's important for me to maybe mention this is that there's quite a difference between chronic caloric restriction and intermittent fasting. There are fasting techniques and fasting mimicking techniques that temporarily lower calories for a time to mimic fasting, but it's not chronically doing it. And refeeding is just as important as the fast or the fasting mimicking protocol. But time restricted feeding, the specific type of subset of intermittent fasting that I'm exploring in intuitive fasting, doesn't have anything to do with caloric restriction. You're just planning on specific windows of eating to leverage these amazing health benefits. So that's to be clear on that. But there are some studies that show, and I cite them in the book, that there ended up being a slight caloric deficit sometimes for the deeper time restricted feeding windows. And that does have some benefits to it. It's like caloric deficit. It's not massive reduction, but that certainly is a fringe benefit of fasting. But many studies have been done because we had to know, and as far as the research is concerned, is it because of the calorie deficit? Is it because of the way that people change the foods that they eat, or was it the actual time? So studies have been done to look at the calories. They were controlled for calories. So the same amount of calories, one's eaten all day long and one has a tighter eating window. The tighter eating window, same amount of calories, saw improved benefits. So we know that is a major...
What are the benefits? Tell us the benefits.
Yeah, so it's... Yeah, I'll give you the short-winded and the long-winded version. The short-winded is Paracelsus, one of the fathers of modern medicine that I quote in the book. He was known as the father of toxicology, or the Martin Luther of medicine, because he was reforming medicine in the late 1400s, early 1500s in Switzerland. He called fasting the physician within, which I think, to me, everything I'm about to say is summarized with that, like this inner doctor that upregulates and activates and repairs and renews and restores and does all these really cool stuff. So it is upregulating so many cool pathways that we all have. We all are operating to some degree, or we'd be dead. But they're very sluggish because of modernity. They're really sluggish because of this genetic epigenetic mismatch. So fasting, because from an ancestral health perspective, fasting is actually coded in our DNA. So we would have evolved over those thousands and thousands of years to spend times, because of food scarcity, in times of fasting. And then we know on top of that, spiritually and early medicine, Hippocrates, Paracelsus, all used fasting, not because they had randomized controlled trials, but because they saw it improve people's health. And now research is just catching up with antiquity, that we see how the mechanisms and we know the benefits of it. But it shifts your body into this metabolic state known as nutritional ketosis, which the ketogenic diet and intermittent fasting and fasting all do that. So ketogenic diet in many ways is a fasting mimicking way of eating. And that's why I pair the intuitive fasting protocol with Ketotarian, which is what I talked about in my first book, but it's just a deeper dive in this book of how do we mimic fasting and fast to leverage these benefits, because it puts the body into this state of nutritional ketosis, which is known in the research as the fourth macronutrient. Ketones are. So we have protein, fats, carbs, and ketones. So it's a way to burn fat. So you get the kindling off of the fire for a little bit. That's the sugar for fuel. And you get a log on the fire. It's being fat adapted. And that's more slow burning, more sustainable. You have energy. That's why people have increased energy levels and fat burning. But there's a time and place for clean carb cycling and the kindling on the fire. And we talk about that in the book. There's nothing inherently wrong with that. It's the best fire, the best light, the best energy is kindling analog. So I don't think you have to pick one or the other and say, well, the sugar is the best or the fat's the best. I think both have their place depending on the person and what their goals are. But it's not just a way to burn fat. Like, I'm so much more excited about, let me back up a little bit. I think the people that are struggling with weight loss resistance, I don't want to delegitimize it. That's exciting for them. But from a functional medicine standpoint, I'm actually more excited about the anti-inflammatory benefits.
Yeah.
It's a way to down-regulate all these pro-inflammatory cytokines. So all these people are going through these chronic inflammatory problems that I mentioned earlier. This is a natural anti-inflammatory you can tap into and upregulate these antioxidant pathways, and also something called autophagy or cellular recycling. It's sort of this accelerated aging pathway, this pro-cellular renewal pathway. It increases mitochondrial biogenesis, actually making new mitochondria, improves BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, encouraging your brain to make new neurons and neuroplasticity. So many cool things. I could speak for hours about it, but it's just allowing your body to do it. It's that physician within that Paracelsus talked about.
Which is amazing. Like, whatever happens, is it like, do you have to be pretty... do you have to know what you're doing or follow a program? Because whatever happened to, remember that whole starvation mode? You don't eat if you wait too long to eat, then your body's going to go into starvation mode. It's going to hold on to those calories, and that's how you're going to gain weight. Is that just a myth altogether? Or do you have to be careful or know what you're doing when you're doing fasting?
That's relatively true again, but not absolutely true. If someone's not fat adapted and they're lowering their calories for long periods of time, right, that's not a good thing. That's going to put the body in this prolonged state of stress while not even fully, depending on what they're eating, they're not going to even be in ketosis probably. They're going to be, because they're eating like maybe lots of refined sugars and stuff. They're just restricting their calories. So it's kind of this metabolic purgatory in that way, where they're neither in heaven or hell. And that's why most dieting fails, is because you get the kindling off the fire, you've never got a log in the fire, and then you just like this like sucks, and you give up on it. Right. And that could definitely put stress hormones up too high and make it really difficult to lose weight. So there's the yin and the yang. There's the fasting and the feasting. You need both of them. And it's not about like one is better. Like they're both important. And that's going back to that Goldilocks principle that I mentioned earlier. Physiologically, they both are amazing. It's let's leverage the benefits of both without falling prey of the potential pitfalls of doing one too much. So it's just the synergy somewhere in the middle, and that's what I'm exploring in the book.
So it's basically you have to get your body to be fat adapted, where then you see all the health benefits, right? So
in part, and that's not going to happen overnight. Depending on how person's eating, it's not going to happen overnight. That's why this is a lifestyle change. But yes, that is the goal. The analogy that I use in the book, and you know this because you read it, but for people that haven't, like I call it this proverbial yoga class for your metabolism. Yeah. And you're stretching, contracting your metabolism. Depending on when you're starting out on your journey, like what's your baseline, it's going to take some time. And for some people, they'll get it faster. And how they eat will definitely either speed up or slow down that metabolic flexibility transition, getting that log in the fire. Because if they're eating lots of carbohydrates and junk food, that's, first of all, I wouldn't advocate that anyways. I don't recommend fasting your way out of a poor diet. That's like not cool. But at the same time, you can see some health benefits of fasting because you're giving your body a break from all the junk at that point. So it has fringe benefits, but that's not the point of this here. It's actually to really take your health to the next level. And that's that. Like you mentioned earlier, like intuitive eating, and you hear that on social media. And that's like big conversation that I have in the book is that, look, there is a certain subset of people that have great health. They feel great. They have no blood sugar problems. And intuitive eating comes naturally to them. And I'm not judging anyone. So if that works for you, great. But what I'm saying is, if you look at the statistics of 50% of the United States has a blood sugar problem, 50 million Americans have an autoimmune condition, millions are struggling with weight loss resistance and hormonal problems. That's that proverbial noise that's going on in the body. And it's going to be hard to discern what's your intuition and what's your hangriness, or what's your intuition or hormone imbalance, or what's your intuition or blood sugar imbalance. So by calming that noise at the beginning, fasting will not be intuitive. So I call the book Intuitive Fasting. It will seem paradoxical at the front end of it, because it is. Yeah. You're addicted to the kindling. So you're not going to have fun with fasting. But that's why I'm starting off gently. Like I'm starting that yoga class. I suck at yoga when I first started, and I still kind of suck at it because I don't do it enough. But if I show up to yoga class, it doesn't mean yoga is not for me. It's like, what the heck? I'm not flexible, and I have to gain metabolic flexibility and keep showing up. That's the same thing that's going on with fasting. You have to gain flexibility. On the other end of it, when you have a log in the fire, fasting will be intuitive, because you'll be able to have proper satiety signals. Your blood sugar will be balanced. You'll be able to go longer without eating because you have created this firm foundation for authentic intuitive eating. And that's what metabolic flexibility is.
That's a great analogy, by the way. It's like people with fitness, they want to go from 0 to 60. Like, well, I want to have a 6-pack. Well, you have to at least go to the gym, and you have to have a clean diet. It takes some time to kind of like get there, but consistency is what it is. And in your book, you talk about the 4-week flexible flexible program. And you ease people into it. It's not like just like, okay, now we're going to go for 22 hours, but so can people in the first week, you do 12 hours. That's how you do a 12-hour feeding time and 12-hour fasting time. If people I'm curious, if people just stay with the 12-12 and don't, kind of go any further, do they still get the health benefits?
Yeah, especially the way that I advocate eating, because they're eating a ketotarian diet, which is a plant-centric, sort of a Mediterranean ketogenic diet. It's very clean, very rich with polyphenols and antioxidants and beneficial fats and fiber, all the stuff you need to be healthy. I mean, you have it there. So if you did that and just did 12-12, and I actually mentioned this in the book in passing, it probably was like a sentence or two, but if you needed to repeat week 1 and do it 2 weeks to 3 weeks, do that. Like there's no reason why you need to rush it. Meet your body where it's at. And certainly I could see week 1 being repeated 2 or 3 times, or if you want to do as long as you, or 10, right? Take it easy. So like, too scary for you.
Yeah.
So,
or just stay at week 1 for as long as you can, basically.
Yeah, right. I mean, I want to integrate feeling great in your life. And sometimes people have to be in the right headspace and the heart space to be there. And if that's forever and indefinitely just doing that, then do that, because you're allowing a couple hours to happen before bed without eating. You're allowing your body to fast through the night. You're eliminating the late night snacking, and you're mimicking some of the benefits of fasting with your food. So yeah, if you did not dig even any deeper over the subsequent 3 weeks in the plan, that certainly would have amazing merits.
Well, because I also think you're also developing healthy habits going forward, right? With because listen, this is not the fact that this is not rocket science about like not eating late before you go to bed or all these other things that people, yes, because you're going to be going to sleep with, sugar and all these other calories and whatever. So, do you notice that when people do when you started, well, how long have you been doing your fasting for? You yourself, you personally?
Since I was a weird kid, since I was a teenager.
You were doing the fasting back then too?
Oh yeah. I read a book called Patient Heal Thyself from Jordan Rubin, who started Garden of Life, and then he sold it, and then he's with Ancient Nutrition now with Josh Axon. These are good guys that I now know them. But like I was like a 14-year-old kid reading Jordan Rubin's book about how he healed his Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis or some inflammatory bowel issue, and used fasting and used these things to get healthy. Yeah, I was doing water fasts and green juice fasts as a teenager.
What do you think of those? What do you think of the water fast and the green juice fasts and all those things?
They have their place. I think they definitely have their place. I don't. That's not what I'm exploring intuitive fasting. I want it to be a sustainable thing for people to do.
Yeah,
and eat ample amounts of food. But longer fasts are something that I definitely explore with patients where it's clinically appropriate. Some people that have very out of control immune systems, they're hyper-inflammatory state, their body's reacting to everything, or they're going through some really serious health issues, those fasts can be life-saving as far as their quality of life. And if do you know Clubhouse? Have you been on?
Yeah, of course, yes.
I'm not good at it, so
neither am I. And I need another, social media application like a hole in the head, right? Like not enough already with everything else.
Yeah, I literally have done nothing on it. But the point of saying is like I'm just used to seeing my patients. But I was in a fasting group on Clubhouse the other day, and I was hearing the amount of people that do these longer fasts on their own, and they're just like, this changed their life. So it was cool to hear that, because like I'm used to like being a part of that, but just hearing other people's stories is really cool. But yeah, that's definitely has its place. Yeah.
Oh, there's been so many reports and research backing the fasting evolution or whatever you want to call it. But no, in your program, the 4-week program, can someone do 4 weeks and then go off for a month or two and come back? Can you stagger? Can you go back and forth and be flexible that way? Or does it ruin all the benefits that you've had already?
No, this is the intuitive part of it is as you get metabolic flexibility, you will grow in intuition. And what I mean by that, physiological foundational stuff like proper blood sugar balance, gut-brain axis communication, the satiety signaling, all that stuff will create a clear signaling for you to hear intuition, the proper knowingness of what your body loves. But we also bring some mindful eating into these 4 weeks and just acts of stillness to grow the mental emotional side of things too, and renegotiate or grow an awareness around your relationship with food and your body. So there's going to be a lot of shifts in growth and awareness over those 4 weeks. So they're going to know, like I did better with more of this. I'm going to do more of this and less of this. And they're going to be able to evolve that protocol to work with them. And that's certainly fine for people to find, and towards the end of the book, I talk about finding your carb sweet spot and like getting a baseline, like what's sustainable for you.
Yeah.
Let's do something that you can do every day. They are going to be able to discover that. For some people to discover it in the 4 weeks, I think most people would do better to reevaluate after 4 weeks, retake that quiz that's in the book that I adapted from questions that I asked patients, and then cycle through another 4 weeks. Because I think after 2 or 3 cycles of 4, they'll have gained so much health and awareness about their body that they'll be able to readjust this and create their like everyday protocol. They will have intuitively built it for themselves. So that's bioindividuality. That's the heart of what functional medicine is. We're all different. So not everybody has to do the deeper fast all the time. They could do it periodically. Many people would do better with these vacillating, intermittent, cyclical fasts throughout their week, throughout their months.
And what happens with people who are like really active, like people who work out a lot, like work out hard? How does this work, your program? How does fasting work with people like that? Like, is there, I guess until you get to that energy, you're saying like eventually people get to that fat adaptive place where they have a lot more energy and they're less brain fog. Is it, so even with that, do you recommend people not exercising hard and when they start, or?
Obviously when I'm talking to patients, I'm with them like via webcam for like weeks on end, so I can adjust it accordingly. So it's like I can where someone's at and adjust it and make it really personalized. But for the book, what I said was, if you don't if you've never done CrossFit, and I don't think like starting this protocol and doing CrossFit would be the right thing, but if you have your normal activity level,
right,
do it. Stick with your activity level because you're not restricting calories. And there's a time and place for fasted workouts, which has its place. I'm not saying everybody has to do it all the time, but it's definitely something to explore and see how you feel. There are many people that really thrive on some intermittent fasted workouts, and they should experiment with that over the course of the 4 weeks.
So then I want to ask you, because there's always a debate in the fitness space, right? Like, do you do cardio on an empty stomach? Do you eat? So you would obviously say the best way to burn fat is to like do cardio on an empty stomach.
Well, it depends, right? Because the context matters, because that person, what are they going through? I guess is the question. Are they going through chronic stress? Are they not sleeping well at night? What are their hormones look like? What's their blood sugar look like? Like you could have, you know what I mean? Like it's like some people, they come on,
Will, give me something. I want you to say, eat breakfast and then go work out. No, I'm just kidding. I want you to tell me, because this is like the debate in my brain. Do I eat first? Do I go to the gym? You know what I mean?
Do both and see how you feel. Because you're going to get different answers depending on who you're talking to. Some people thrive off that cardio that's fasted. They thrive on it. And then some people are like, I can't give as much. I'm really like puttering out. I can't do as much cardio when I'm in a fasted state. And what's true for you now will not necessarily be what's true for you months down the road when you've changed your health. So I would say meet your body where it's at, experiment with both. And that's what I advocate in the book. Try a fasted, try a non-fasted workout and see where you're at. And then as you gain metabolic flexibility, you will find that what is true for you now isn't necessarily what you were dealing with back then.
No, I agree. And I also will say to that point, I think everything's hard at the beginning, but you adapt. Right. Like I never thought in a million years I would be able to like work out without eating, but I have, knowing that you were coming on the podcast, I tried to do that a little bit. And I will tell you, now I don't want to eat breakfast before I work out. I pushed I'm not great at it, but I pushed my breakfast like 3 hours. I mean, it's a start, right?
Absolutely.
Baby steps.
If you did, let's just say 11 a.m.
Yeah.
That's a 17-hour fast if you do like 11 to 6. I mean, that's week 2. You've already done week 2.
No, I have not. I've been like trying to do like 7 or 8 o'clock until like 10 or 11. I mean, like, listen, and it's hard. Not every day. It's like random. I'm not doing any program, but you are knowing that, like I said, that you're going to be on the podcast. I was like, I'm going to try to do this. And I've done better than I've done in the past. So, I mean, like I said, it's all baby steps here.
Yeah. And you know what? Week 3 is the deepest fast. Well, look, I mean, you have True Niagen behind you.
Yes.
I talk about NAD in the book. So shout out to True Niagen. I mean, nicotinamide riboside, these types of B vitamins support NAD. Well, fasting can support NAD levels too. So True Niagen plus deeper fasts. 2 ways to increase.
100%. I love that you said that. So that I'm like, that's my buddy over there. I take that every single day and I work. That's what I do in the morning. I take the True Niagen. I drink some coffee. I'm sorry, no Earl Grey for me. I have some water. And then I jump on the treadmill. Because, by the way, we usually do this on a treadmill.
Oh,
I don't know
cool.
if you know this podcast, but because of everything happening with COVID,
Yeah.
everything has gone this way. But hopefully one day, I mean, I'm digressing here, but hopefully next time we can go on the treadmill if you're ever in LA, we can do it properly. But so you are a big fan of NAD then too. I was going to ask you about also tell us about, what supplements are you a believer in? Why? Tell us about NAD, because I think still, even though I talk about it, a lot of people don't really understand the importance of it and what it is.
Yeah, so NAD is needed for cellular energy and repair, and it depletes as we age. And there's promising studies, and the people at True Niagen are legitimate. I mean, they're really serious about the science about it. But the fact that we can support NAD levels, cellular energy, which we need for just healthy aging, a long, healthy life. In nicotinamide riboside, this type of B vitamin can help support NAD levels. Fasting can do the same. So I love True Niagen. I take it.
You do? I love it.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So, I do. I don't have any, like, they're sweet people, and I've done certain like educational stuff for them. But I also like the Mind Body Greens NR Plus. That's like another nicotinamide riboside. And there's other ones out there. It depends on what you want to do. But I love True Niagen, and my supplements that I take, I typically just do like the foundational stuff, because it's just, I use food as medicine. I don't think you should try to supplement your way out of a poor diet. I think that if you're really working on nutrient density, food is first, fasting second, and supplements are after that. So
vitamin D though, how about vitamin D? People say that's very good for like even hormone regulation or just for daily immune system health. Do you believe in that one?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, vitamin D is responsible for over 2,000 different pathways in the body. It acts as almost a pro-hormone. So every cell of your body has a vitamin D receptor site. No other hormone has that level of importance other than the thyroid. So I call it, the thyroid and vitamin D is the queen and the king of all hormones. If your thyroid's not working well, nothing's working well. Vitamin D's not working well, nothing's working well. Right. So the optimal range for vitamin D is about 60 to 100. You could say 60 to 80 to be a little bit more moderate there. But a lot of times people with autoimmunity tend to do better with 80-ish, 90-ish vitamin D levels. I pair it with vitamin K2, which is another fat-soluble vitamin that is deficient, just like vitamin D is deficient. And it's hard to get vitamin D from foods. So that's where supplementation really plays a part. Unless I'm like in a loincloth in Miami 12 months a year, I'm not getting sun here in Pittsburgh. It's cold.
Well, you got to go get a loincloth then and go to Miami or even LA. I mean, so people who live in Miami or live in LA with the sun, they still could be deficient though in vitamin D, right?
Oh, I see it all the time. I'm joking about Miami, but I see a lot of people. I see a lot of patients in Miami. I see a lot of patients in Arizona. I see a lot of patients in Southern California. They're vitamin D deficient too. So it's not just about, most of the time people aren't outside that much anyway. So even if it is sunny outside, people aren't getting enough direct sunlight, and they have clothes on and there's sunscreen that can block it too. So there's that side of it. And I'm not saying not wearing sunscreen. I'm just saying that it blocks vitamin D. So so it doesn't matter where you live. You should have your vitamin D levels checked, because that's modernity. That's that genetic epigenetic mismatch. Our bodies haven't adapted to this much inside life. That's why we're vitamin D deficient. We don't have proper circadian rhythms because we don't have normal natural light. It impacts sleep, it impacts our mood, it impacts our immune system. It's so important to get proper daylight exposure and then proper, obviously, nighttime without having blue lights in our face all the time on screen. So that impacts tons of stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. A couple more questions in your book, and then we can wrap it. I want to talk about carb cycling. You talk about cycling a lot in the book. How do you do it properly? Because I feel like it can get very complicated.
Yeah, it can. And I like keeping health simple. I don't want to overcomplicate it. I have some patients that are biohackers, but that's actually not the majority of my patient base. some people thrive off of the granular and they want to get super wonky about it, but I don't like it. I think there should be a grace and an ease to wellness. And look, it's going to be a learning curve. At the beginning, maybe it's going to be good to get a little bit granular so you can at least eyeball and become aware of how your body uses fuel and where do you feel the best, and track on like a chronometer or MyFitnessPal or a diet tracking app of some sort. But do that a couple weeks, maybe even 1 week. You can start to know, okay, this is my basic breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This is my meals that I do. And people are pretty creatures of habit, and they'll kind of get a rhythm on like, okay, this is what I do. I adjust this, and then this is what I do to feel great. So clean carb cycling, that's the kindling on the fire. There's a time and place for that. You've got the log on the fire, but you need to put the kindling on too. Women especially will benefit from this. And I should preface this with that all women are different. And I know that people like to pontificate and say fasting's bad for women or keto's bad for women. It's like, who is she? Because I've met tons of different women with tons of different health issues. And to reduce them to like women is very unfair to many women. So is she going through PCOS or metabolic issues or weight loss resistance or autoimmune issues or neurological issues? Fasting will be a completely different story to her. Even deeper fast will be different for her than someone that doesn't have those issues. She's lean, she's going through a chronic stress time, or she's not getting enough sleep, she's low thyroid issues. All women, fasting will behave differently in their body. But I do think that most women do better with a cyclical approach. And then as they grow in intuition and know about their body, some women will do better with the deeper fast, some women won't. So they're going to find that sweet spot both with fasting and carb moderation. Because remember, the ketogenic diet mimics fasting. So most women tend to be higher in something called kisspeptin, which is a signaling molecule that makes a lot of women more sensitive to prolonged states of fasting or prolonged states of ketosis through fasting or the ketogenic diet. So clean carb cycling is a tool that we can really use to leverage these amazing benefits of being keto adapted, getting that log in the fire without thinking that all you need is a log. I mean, progesterone, the thyroid hormone, the gut microbiome, and just enjoying food. I think that there's a lot of beauty in clean carb cycling, but you don't have to be super complex. I mean, the meal plan in the book, I took all the guesswork out of it anyway. So if you ate and just followed the plan in the book and just learned about it, then you'll know after doing it 1 month, you'll say, okay, that wasn't so hard. You didn't overcomplicate it. You didn't even need a diet tracking app because I did all the math for you. But if you wanted to track it, you could. But once you've done this for a month or so, there should be an intuition on this stuff where you just eyeball foods, and that's going to be enough for most people.
Yeah. Can someone do your program without the ketogenic portion and they just regularly eat what they were going to eat anyway, but just with reason? I mean, not,
not junk food.
Not junk food, but like if they didn't want to do the ketogenic way, but they wanted just to do the 4 week and just kind of learn and kind of get better at it, would they still deem the results?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would just say it's amplified doing it the way that I advocate for.
Yeah.
But it's not that you need one without the other. They both stand on their own. I'm just saying they're amplified when they're done together because the Ketotarian way of eating makes your fast easier. So you'll have a lot more of an effortlessness when it comes to fasting. And then the fast will make you more keto adapted. So it'll make the eating a lot easier as well. They both are synergistic and they both make each other more beneficial.
Yeah. And you're not a vegan, right? Or a vegetarian. And like, no. I was surprised. I thought for sure you're going to be like a vegan, and you're not. Like you eat meat.
I did that vegan vibe off. I don't know. I didn't know I did that.
You did. You do. I just feel. But now, like when I saw that, I was like, okay, because I'm not a vegan. So you're a big not big, but you have no problem with like a carnivore diet, or what's your take on this whole vegan craze as well? I feel like there's also a whole like movement now with veganism. So what do you think, Dr. Will?
Well, I wrote Ketotarian and I pissed people off with my first book.
I'm sure.
mostly plant-based ketogenic book. So I pissed off a lot of the vegans because there was an egg inside an avocado, and I said the word mostly plant-based because apparently they own the words plant-based. It's like this tribalism is ridiculous.
Unbelievable.
But then I pissed off the ketogenic community too, because they were like, they have this unhealthy fear of vegetable fiber. So it's like either way, I irritated both sides. But look, the truth is often sometimes somewhere in the middle, and context matters. And I'm not just giving my opinion. This is like years of clinical experience and tons of research. And you don't have to pick one or the other. The balance of both, being mostly plant-based, a clean ketogenic diet, which is what Ketotarian is it's more of a Mediterranean way of eating. It's plant forward, but it's not entirely entirely plants. So what I think about the vegans, I think that if you do a vegan diet, there's tons of vegan keto options in Ketotarian and in intuitive fasting. I mean,
there's a lot, way too many for my liking. No, I'm joking.
So, and I marked them all. There's tons of vegans. It's vegetarians or like clean pescatarian, vegetarian, and then there's the vegivore section. There's grass-fed beef and lots of omnivore options too. So I try to be as inclusive as possible. But what do I think about? I think it's fine if people are led that way, and if their health is great, if what they're doing is working for them, keep doing it. I think I bring up these points in Ketotarian about the bioavailability of certain nutrients and long chain omega fatty acids and iron and B12, and we can talk about that. But you can supplement with it and mitigate that. I would just say if you can't get all your nutrients from food, is it really the most optimal diet for you? And that's why I recommended a more of a Mediterranean ketogenic way of eating, which still has tons of plants, but it brings in some of these food medicines that you cannot fully mimic in a capsule, in a supplement form. So it is really food as medicine. So I don't have a problem with it. And I don't have a problem with the carnivore diet too. I mean, Paul Saladino is a great friend of mine. And
he was on here. I liked him. Yeah.
He is a genius. I mean, he's a very smart guy.
So smart. I mean, listen, the guy is so knowledgeable. I mean, I was riveted by everything he was saying. And he hasn't eaten a vegetable in 20 years now. But
he's a little bit of a freak, but whatever. We love him. But
he's a little bit of a freak for sure. Definitely. My God.
I've said this many times before, I use a clean, well-formulated carnivore diet for people who need it. I mean, Paul says it differently than I say it, but I use it as an ultimate elimination diet approach for a time for people that have out of control food reactivities. They have histamine intolerance, have FODMAP intolerance, and salicylate intolerance, and oxalate intolerance, and their body's reacting to air and ice cubes in a negative way. That a carnivore diet is going to be a good tool to use for a time, but then we have to transition them out of it. So I do that all the time with patients that I need to, but one size doesn't fit all. And what you need today isn't necessarily what you need to do forever and ever. So I see a place for all of these things. It's like how we're doing it, who's doing it, and for how long are we doing it? That's the context that's important.
Oh, you're very knowledgeable. I just have a quick random question. Why is everybody now giving out these poop tests? You gotta they check your stool, I feel, to get all your information. Is that a new fad in the last couple of years? I feel like it's become very popular
I may have been due to
Is it because of you?
No, I'm not, just kidding. But I've been writing about microbiome health for a long time, so that's probably part of it. But
I'm sure it's you to blame.
Yeah, well, us maybe in functional medicine, and you know what? It's really all the amazing research coming out of PubMed. I mean, there's thousands of studies over the past 10 years looking at the gut, and then that trickles down to the clinical side of things, and it trickles down to the direct to consumer labs too, where people wanting to not even go through a doctor to want to find out about their health. So I like it. I think it's cool. It's informative, but the reality is a lot of times these direct to consumer stool labs, there's very little what do I do with this information? It's cool, but it's what is it? Is it really going to change my decision making? Sometimes it does.
Right.
Or for many people, I get these lab results from patients, and we say it from the clinic, give us your last year of labs, and I'll get these pilot labs. And a lot of times these tests, that I won't name them. I don't have any problem with them personally, but the persons are like, the people are like, I don't even know what to do with this information. Like, what's it even mean? And even me, from a functional medicine standpoint, knowing every little bit of colony forming units of every bacteria, I don't need to know all that information at this point. Later on, as we learn more about the microbiome, maybe we'll have better clinical, practical, what's this do? But right now, it's just like a lot of data, but not necessarily a lot of action steps. So we run different labs in functional medicine when it comes to gut health. I don't need to know every nuance of every colony forming unit of bacteria.
But do you do that test? Do you do a much more specific poop test with you guys? Okay. And what do you get? Tell us.
This is what we're looking at differently. And this will determine action steps. To me, it's like, all right, if something is cool information to learn about it, I'm not against it. If someone wants to learn about their body, let them learn about it. But for me, from a functional medicine standpoint, I only want to run things that are going to change what we do, to actually do something about it instead of just looking at labs for the sake of it. Because it's like, what's the point of it if it's not going to actually change what we do, and we can compare and contrast it over time and after we get our baseline and we implement an intervention. So for patients, for their stool test, what we do is we're looking at good bacteria. We're looking for bacterial overgrowths or dysbiosis. So people that have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, or SIFO, small intestinal fungal overgrowth. We're looking at those through stool tests and breath tests to look at bacterial and fungal overgrowths. Those people get IBS, they have inflammatory bowel issues, they have acid reflux, they have bloating, they have other type of autoimmune issues a lot of times. We need to know that. And we also need to know if there's inflammatory markers in the gut. So things like calprotectin, lactoferrin, lysozyme. These are inflammatory markers that you can get on a stool test, because inflammation in the gut, you can use that as a baseline and see that inflammation levels come down as you improve their health. And then same with intestinal permeability or leaky gut syndrome. You can rule that in with a stool test and blood test as well, to look at the landscape of someone that can trigger inflammation levels in the body. And digestion and absorption. You want to look at that, if their body is actually absorbing nutrients. These are things that you can get pre and post, and you can actually make action steps on determining a protocol that's appropriate for them.
Well, thank you. I'm going to leave it at that. I mean, great question to finish with, but
We can start and finish our conversation with microbiome poop tests anytime with me. So.
Okay, good. Because I love that. That was my favorite question of all, because I was so curious. I feel like everyone and their dog now are like, hey, I got my poop analyzed, or have you gotten this done, or have you done? Everyone's talking about this test. I mean, the last couple of years, and like that's like the benchmark now for someone's health. So I'm like, I'm going to ask, Dr. Will when I have him on and see what he thinks. So there you go. That's what I did. So the book is called, I don't have a copy. I was reading it on I only got like the electronic version. That's why I would show it. But the book is called Intuitive Fasting. It's out February 23rd. Yeah, February 23rd. It's out of the 3 books that I've written, it's my favorite book by far to write. I wrote it over end of 2019, over COVID. 2020 was like, I was holed up in my house writing this book. So I'm excited that it's out now. Oh my God, amazing. And then where do people find you if they want to know more about fasting, inflammation, ketotarian, poop, whatever?
Everything's at drwillcole.com. That's drwillcole.com.
Amazing. And social media, you're on social media, aren't you?
Yeah, at Dr. Will Cole on Instagram, drwillcole, on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Clubhouse.
Oh God. And of course you're on Goop. You could just like go on Goop and there's like 1,000 things of you. You're like the house doctor, or the house practitioner. And well, it was so nice to meet you. You're just a doll and such a wealth of information. I mean, your vocabulary. I mean, you should be an English teacher because you speak so well.
I'm a musician. So I love talking about this stuff. So thank you so much.
Habits and hustle, time to get it rolling. Stay up on the grind, don't stop, keep it going. Habits and hustle, from nothing into something. All out, hosted by Jennifer Cohen. Visionaries, tune in, you can get to know them. Be inspired, this is your moment. Excuses, we ain't having that. The Habits and Hustle podcast, powered by Habit Nest.